Wednesday let her head linger against the door. To see Enid wholly, to see Enid in all her fears and sadness manifested like this was. She didn't like it. Enid to her was sunshine, the personification of the word optimism. She tried to remind herself that was the spell's doing and not Enid, not really. But Wednesday knew deep in her heart that like the other Enids, this was a part of her, in the background, perhaps at times she was not privy to. The coloring pencils. The coloring book. Wednesday felt her blood run colder than normal. Had she been so blind to miss such a simple sign? Too wrapped up in her writing and investigations to notice it. She colored when she was sad. She colored every night. She colored after Ajax had broken up with her. Her dark eyes glittered dangerously as she turned to look down the corridor, revenge festered in her heart. But that was not Enid needed right now. So like the onset of an incoming storm, she stalked down the corridor and down towards the library. She winced as she passed Yoko's room where the gaggle of the other Enids could be heard laughing and talking loudly. She paused and listened and closed her eyes. Once upon a time she would have detested the joy and excitement of her roommate. But now she longed for it, she wished to hear it again. She wished to hear her roommate whole and happy again, and she would make it so and help her through whatever darkness she was going through. She walked on. She would see her be happy again. She would see her smile again. But there was something else there, something Enid kept close to her heart, she could feel it. She passed a couple coming up the same staircase as her, they gave her a wide berth, sensing the aura of a choking shadow surrounding her. She descended the stone steps until she bumped into someone, their hands reaching out to steady her. "Oh sorry, Wednesday," "Hey," Ajax rambled off nervously. Her eyes narrowed into slits, the viper inside her quailing back, desperately wanting to strike. Ajax Wednesday settled on as neutrally as possible. "Is Enid upstairs?" "I needed to talk to her," Ajax asked nervously. Wednesday saw red. "Why?" "So you can plunge the knife in deeper? Twist it that little bit more?" "No, you've done enough," Wednesday spat spitefully. I need to apologize," he implored. "For what? Breaking her heart or for being a slithering, skulking little coward?" Wednesday seethed. Ajax narrowed his eyes. "Whoa," he said, holding his hands up defensively. "I wanted to make things right." He paused. "I wasn't in my right head last night," he said, quieter. Wednesday took a dangerous step forward. "Then listen up, Snake." Ajax's mouth twitched at the term. "Try to go near her again, I will break your jaw," Wednesday promised, her tone dripping in ice. Ajax scoffed and tried to push past her, but she planted her feet and gave him a rough shove backwards. Ajax laughed under his breath. "Let me pass, Wednesday," Ajax said, "final warning, take heed because I don't give them often." Wednesday nearly growled, she never gave warnings, this was for Enid's sake and only for hers. Ajax's face gave way to anger. "You wanna know why I broke up with her? Wanna know why, Wednesday?" he said, tone laced with venom. "Why don't you enlighten me?" Wednesday said tonelessly. She was curious to know, however. Ajax scoffed. "Because of you." Internally Wednesday's heart sang in joy, every nerve in her body was being drowned in dopamine. But her face revealed nothing, except the rising of her eyebrow. But Ajax wasn't done. "All she does is talk about you. Wednesday this, Wednesday that. I have no control over what Enid wishes to talk about." Wednesday said nonchalantly. "That's not the point." Ajax nearly screamed. Wednesday stood unfazed by the outburst, although his ire was drawing onlookers. "The point is you're all she ever wants to talk about. I was fed up with it." "Then that is your problem to overcome, not mine and certainly not hers." "She's my girlfriend, it is her problem," he insisted. "Ex-girlfriend," Wednesday said, taking an obscene amount of pleasure watching Ajax's face twist into something incredibly unpleasant. "You made that choice," Wednesday said. "Not after when I go speak to her." Ajax said, making to push past her again. You will do no such thing, Wednesday said, taking a step to the side to block his path again. There was a moment where the two stood their ground, Ajax's eyes boring into hers in a silent fury, until his arm shot out, grappling her by the shoulders to forcibly move her, but Wednesday's arm was a blur, her fist colliding with his face. The assembled crowd owed at the sound of an audible crack, a small splatter of blood hitting the floor from Ajax's most likely broken nose. Wednesday's hand throbbed in agony, although the adrenaline surging through her body had numbed her to it. Ajax's face was a bloody mess, blood pouring freely from both nostrils. She was cheating on me with you, wasn't she? Ajax seethed, attempting to stem the blood flow with the sleeve of his arm. The assembled crowd that was only growing bigger had a mixed reaction. Mostly used a few jeers, and one guy in the back wolf whistled and yelled, "Get it, Wednesday." She did no such thing. Wednesday growled, her fists clenching. Don't lie to me. She couldn't even kiss me anymore. Ajax screamed. Then why pursue her again? Because I was here first. And that was what it came down to in the end, didn't it? Possession and jealousy were an incredibly dangerous combination, and to throw in a teenage boy into the mix made it a ticking time bomb. He saw her as a rival, like an animal fighting over a mate. Only that Wednesday didn't want this fight, she only wanted Enid to be happy, even if it wasn't with her. Wednesday took a step forward, maybe so she conceded. But when you are gone, do you know who will still be here? Ajax could only sneer. Me, she declared. She saw it many times in the asylum, when one's mind finally cracks and they get that look, that crazy-eyed look. Ajax made to move forward, but Wednesday was faster, the knife was in her hand before she could even register it. She wasn't just protecting herself, but Enid from this boy, who with a few carefully chosen words, she had given temporary insanity. The assembled crowd collectively gasped at the weapon in her hand and backed up as a collective. Even Ajax halted in his tracks, seeing the silver glint in the light. Give me a fucking reason, I dare you. Wednesday's voice was dangerously quiet, close to being unhinged herself. It seemed like everyone was holding their breath as Ajax and Wednesday stared each other down for a mere few seconds. The crowd was unsure of what they wanted to happen. Ajax wisely took a step back. You're welcome to her. He spat. No one wants a half-wolf anyway, I do. Wednesday proudly declared. The students around them couldn't believe their ears. I would kill for her and I would die for her, neither of which you would be prepared to do. Ajax clenched his jaw and turned away, shoving his way through the crowd towards Xavier. Wednesday's eyes met Xavier's, the latter giving her a respectful nod. Before Ajax strode up to him, Xavier's face contorted in concern. She just about caught his words as they walked away. Dude, are you crazy? Her eyes looked around at the crowd around her. If this ever gets back to Enid, I will get every single one of you. I have memorized each and every one of your faces, am I clear? The students looked at each other nervously before nodding their heads, knowing she was 100% serious considering the silver blade in her possession. The crowd slowly began to split off into their respective groups. Wednesday slid the blade back into the hidden pocket up her sleeve, latching the button to keep the knife sheathed. It's a shame, she would have been curious to see how long it would have taken for her to have cut clean through the Gorgon's head. Wow. You really do love her, don't you? Came the smug voice. Wednesday rolled her eyes and began to walk away from the vampire who jogged to catch up with her. What are you doing here, Tanaka? You're supposed to be with the Enids. She asked impatiently. No denial either, Yoko noted as she came alongside the goth. Anyway, they're with Divina playing Uno, she said with a shrug. Wednesday paused mid-stride. Even Lucifer himself would not play with such fire, Wednesday said. Yoko shrugged again. They seemed fine when I left. It's not like Yoko had received a text 5 minutes before from Divina with the words help me. So it's true then? Yoko asked you and Enid, huh? Wouldn't Haven taken you for the type? Wednesday sighed. There is no Enid and I. Tanaka, Ajax was wrong in his accusations. But you wish it was though, don't you? Yoko asked knowingly. Wednesday glared at her with a serious amount of side-eye. I don't have time for this, she said with a huff and sped up her pace, leaving Yoko behind. She loves you too, you know, Yoko said softly. Wednesday halted, her heart thundered against her chest. WH. What? Wednesday asked shakily. She stood on the precipice of what she could handle, her useless, traitor of a heart yearned and longed for the words to be real, to be true. Yoko came up slowly to stand beside her. She loves you too. Yoko said simply. I don't love Wednesday began. Save it, Wednesday. Yoko almost snapped. Who are you trying to convince here, me or yourself? How? Wednesday swallowed. How do you know she does? She asked. Yoko smiled. Because she doesn't stop talking about you, she always wants to know what you think about something, or she'll go on this tangent and then get this faraway look in her eyes and she'll smile to herself. Sometimes it's happy and sometimes it's sad. How? Wednesday implored. Like she'll be all excited and then it will just kind of die away. Yoko said, shrugging. Like the bubble was popped, you know? That doesn't prove anything, Wednesday huffed. That's true, Yoko agreed. But she doesn't have to say it. I have been her best friend for years. I know that wolf like the back of my hand now, Wednesday. You did more for her than I ever could. I doubt that. Wednesday said dismissively. Really? Yoko said with an evil glint to her eye. Did you know whenever she faces a tough or stressful situation she'll mutter under her breath WWWD every time, without fail? She said smugly. What would Wednesday do? Wednesday said softly. Yep. You gave her the confidence to be herself. Which even I couldn't do after 3 years. Yoko said. The night you two had your fight, after what happened at the Gates mansion, Enid came into my room and cried her eyes out, like she was going through a breakup. Wednesday swallowed. Hearing it from Enid was one thing, but from another? Torturous. Until she heard the cello, she moved to the window the moment and opened it. I watched her listen to it. I watched how she closed her eyes listening to your lament. I have been around a while, Adams. I know despair when I hear it. Yoko said before Wednesday could protest. She cried silently as she stood there. And that's when it clicked for me. Whether she knew it at the time or not. And the night she wolfed out? To save you? She did that for you. And believe me, that girl tried everything to transform. And that hug you two shared all but confirmed it for me. Wednesday couldn't fathom it. She simply couldn't. Enid is in love with you, Wednesday simply strode away. You'll realize that by the time this is over. Yoko called after her but was promptly ignored by the seer. Wednesday threw another book from her angrily. None of these had a single reference to the problem she was facing with this spell. Nothing whatsoever. It was the 4th book she had searched through. Nevermore was meant to have the biggest repository of knowledge this side of the Atlantic. How could it lack a counterspell for something gone this awry? She had no idea if the spell would last until the end of the day like she had planned. The entire spell had been corrupted beyond repair. She pulled one final book out of the shelf and made to leave, with it tucked under arm. She walked past the librarian's desk. An older woman with graying hair eyed her with the unstamped book under her arm and made to protest. Excuse me, Miss Adams. Mrs. Eagle called after her, but was promptly ignored. Children these days. She huffed to herself, no respect for books. Stamping a book much more harder than she needed to. It had been an hour since she left sad Enid alone in their dorm. She cursed her misfortune. The confrontation with Ajax and subsequent conversation with Yoko had took up more time than she had first realized. She climbed the steps 2 at a time. She pushed past Yoko's dorm where angry shouting could be heard from within. You can't put a +4 on a +4. One of the Enids screamed. Fucking watch me. Another screamed back. Briefly she wondered which two were at each other's throats. But she didn't stay around to listen, and she hastened to their dorm. She opened the door and hastily closed it. Enid she cut herself off, seeing that Enid's bed was empty. although the coloring pencils were still there, along with the doodles that sad Enid had been doing. Her eyes looked at the picture that was actually incredibly well drawn considering Enid took no art clubs outside of the norm. The moon was full and Enid was transformed into her wolf from Wednesday atop her back, sword drawn, facing down what she presumed was the hide considering that part of the drawing was unfinished. She swallowed uncomfortably, feeling like she was intruding on something incredibly personal, so she turned away. If she had looked at the picture a second longer she would have noticed the small band of gold sitting atop Wednesday's left hand. She looked around the room before sighing and moving over to her side of the room and placing the book down on the table. At least thing was probably with sad Enid, which was a comfort. She sat down on the edge of her bed tiredly. Until two slender arms snaked their way round the back of her neck, draping their way down to her front. "Howdy, Rumi," the voice sultrily said. Wednesday shot to her feet, the knife from within her sleeve was in her grasp, ready to attack. "Knife play already, huh? I should have known, Rumi," Enid said with a smirk and wink, sitting back on her haunches. She was completely naked. Wednesday knew not where to focus her gaze, and decided to lock eyes with hers, not trusting them to wander anywhere they shouldn't. "Enid, you have no clothes on," Wednesday hissed. "Well spotted, detective. Now how about you come over here and investigate me, cowgirl," Enid said sensually. Wednesday was utterly bewildered. How was she even supposed to handle this? She could see the top of Enid's collarbone, and even that was enough to send her mind spiraling. From her slender shoulders to the cute little freckle that adorned the front of her collarbone, Wednesday was completely enamored with the other girl's beauty. Wednesday took a deep breath and shut her eyes. Although this was only one aspect for her personality, it was still Enid. So Wednesday did the only thing she could. She stepped forward until she felt her legs hit the edge of the bed with a small thump. She winced as her kneecaps stung until she was pulling her extremely oversized hoodie over her head. She opened her eyes to see Enid looking back at her expectantly until there was a small gasp as Wednesday pulled the hoodie down Enid's body, averting her eyes as she did so until the majority of Enid's body was covered. Enid's hands poked their ways out of the sleeves and her head popped out to face Wednesday. "You don't like me, do you?" Enid said dejectedly, turning her head away. Wednesday took her hands and made Enid face her again. The wolf didn't attempt to pull away from the other girl's firm grasp. "Enid." Wednesday considered her words carefully. "Whether I wanted to or not does not matter, it's whether you want to," she began. "Yes. Yes." Enid giggled excitedly. "I do. Yes." But Wednesday held up a hand, curbing the other girl's enthusiasm. "Remember, there are 8 other Enids, each of you part of the whole, each part of you a piece. Of course I know that's silly. Then you must also realize only this part of you has consented to this, the other 8 have not, and when you are whole again, and believe me I will make that so, you will remember everything that all 9 of you have done. So, no fun times with you without my whole consent." "That is correct. And that goes for anyone else. I will eviscerate them if I find out they have disrespected you in that way." Cowgirl Enid sat and thought about it for a moment. "You are the sweetest person I have ever met. When's you take that back?" Wednesday replied, affronted. But Cowgirl Enid giggled no backsies. She called as she stood up and bent over to pick up her clothes off the floor. Wednesday watched as the hem of the hoodie rode up as she did so, showing off Enid's incredibly smooth and slender legs. Cowgirl Enid smirked. "So you do like what you see, good to know, Rumi," Enid said with a playful wink before skipping from the room in a fit of giggles. Wednesday growled in frustration. The knife was hurled into the back of the door as it slammed shut. Wednesday ripped the knife out of the wood, cursing the day she met Enid Sinclair and her infuriating ability to escape her wrath unscathed. She paused upon seeing another Enid outside, this one without her blonde hair. Sad Enid. She holstered the knife and hastened towards the window. Sad Enid turned to glance back at her as she stepped through. "You didn't come back." It wasn't an accusation, just a statement. "I got sidetracked," Wednesday said, coming to rest against the stone railing. "With what?" Sad Enid asked curiously. The fight with Ajax came to mind. "Ajax was attempting to come and see you, I stopped him." "Thank you." I didn't want to see him, Enid said despondently. I know. He doesn't deserve to after what he did. Crushing his testicles is still on offer, Wednesday said hopefully. Enid chuckled sadly. No, Wens, it's okay, really. There was a moment of silence. Did you find what you were looking for? Wednesday turned to look at her. The sadness that seemed to always be there pierced her and lay everything she was to bear. She looked at everything Enid was and finally found contentment in the fact she had fallen, well and truly, in love with Enid Sinclair. Yes. I did, she answered honestly. But she wasn't on about the book. Wednesday steadied her breath and reached out with a hand. Enid's eyes widened as the Goth took her hand in her own, lacing their fingers together. But you hate touch, Enid said in amazement. It's you, Enid. And that's enough, Wednesday said. But something wasn't right. She looked back at the room and realized something. Wait. Where is Wolf, Enid? And at that moment, Ajax didn't realize just how much danger he was in.